Hello everyone, Jess with Emotional Fire Academy, here to talk about the highly sensitive person and anger and just some knowledge and tips on how to deal with it. Make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to give you an excellent tool to deal with anger in an emergency situation and help dissipate it the best possible way you can. So subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week about what it's like to be a highly sensitive person. And who am I? I am your driver operator on this journey. I am an emotional engineer. My name is Jess, former firefighter, and I help highly sensitive people up level in life with their emotions, particularly. All right, so most of my research today has come from this excellent book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky. This book will change your life. Excellent resource, describes behavior from like the very second it happens to like thousands of years before it happens. It's an epic journey if you're in for that kind of really dense nonfiction like I am. So yeah. So anger, let's start with this. This is an emotion I used to have really huge issues with. I was angry a lot. So, and I tried a bunch of different tools to deal with my anger. And as I got to understand like where anger comes from and how it happens, it really helped me, and I know it's going to help you. So let's kind of dive into the biology of it first. So there's a couple of brain structures involved with anger, and we're kind of assuming that aggression kind of goes into that category. So anger and aggression originate in the amygdala. The amygdala is these two almond-shaped structures in your brain that is essentially the epicenter of fight or flight response, right? When we hear about that, the amygdala is the culprit for activating that. And what it really is the fear center. So it deals exclusively with fear in humans. Anxiety is kind of tacked onto that. If you stick an electrode into somebody's amygdala and stimulate it, they will fly into a rage. So we know that fear and anger are very, very closely tied, and kind of the differentiator is how you're framing it, right, and how your conditioning is. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But anger, especially as an emotion, comes when we get data that has an autobiographical nature. So, right, anger is from that feeling of this is affecting me, right? I have been disrespected. I have lost something. I am affected by this, right? That autobiographical nature to it is kind of what differentiates anger from fear, and other emotions, excitement, right? And so what dampens the amygdala, so the amygdala gets activated. The prefrontal cortex is the other player in this game. So the prefrontal cortex obviously is a little bit higher structure in the brain, obviously in the front of your brain. It's kind of part of the neocortex. So one of the outer structures, they think that, it was more recently evolved. This is all very speculative. Brain research is constantly evolving, and so take it for a grain of salt for what it is today, for what I'm giving you. And it's because it's going to keep changing. The science constantly changes, right? And how well people's prefrontal cortex works, right? The prefrontal cortex is the decider. The prefrontal cortex does the harder thing, in a situation when you should take the high road. So the prefrontal cortex is kind of like, the angel on your shoulder who's like, oh, you really shouldn't do that. And the amygdala is like the devil who's like, oh, just stab that person. So these are kind of the two competing structures that regulate each other, and they talk to each other and they influence each other. And how well your prefrontal cortex works is wildly variable between individuals. So the metabolic, amount that amount of blood flow and nutrients that your prefrontal cortex gets, totally individualized. So that's how you can have people who have really huge anger issues and some that are like super calm and aren't frazzled by anything. Interestingly enough, the prefrontal cortex does not really come online until late adolescence, so like, early 20s. So that's why teenagers are very amygdala driven, right? They're very reactive. And so when that prefrontal cortex does develop and kick in, it dampens that activity of the amygdala. And so we perceive, a stimulus that makes us, that activates our amygdala, we get angry, and then what happens, we get a flood of hormones and into our body that gives us this burst of energy so we can fight. We can go into fight if we so choose, or we can run away if we so choose. We can activate either fight or flight. And so these hormones and this burst of energy can last anywhere from 20 minutes to several days later, depending again on your conditioning, your physiology, what your body does with those hormones. So, when people kind of go into an anger and then they're not themselves, they just don't act like themselves, and they have a really, long lag time of coming down, that has a biological basis to it, right? That's physiology at work. It's because your body is flooded with hormones and you are acting out of the influence of those hormones. Hormones essentially turn up the volume on behavior. So if you're already kind of an angry person, they're going to make you angrier. If you're already a sad person, they're going to make you sadder. And they just kind of amp up the activity, the natural, well, not the natural, but the conditioned behaviors of your body and your mind. So, and what they found is that, so if you have these hormones in your body, right, you got that little burst of hormones, the anger was activated, you're more susceptible then, while the hormones are still floating around in your system, to get angry again, right? And because you've primed the pump to be angry. And so we know that, and they also found that if you put pressure on yourself they did some experiments. And one particularly referenced in the book is that, they showed people pictures that might upset them, and then they showed them again and told them to suppress the feeling. And trying to suppress the feeling, again, activates the amygdala all over again. So stuffing things down actually activates your amygdala a second time, because it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, and I don't know if I can do this, and like trying to control it with thought and is really, really difficult. So that's something that the research is pointing to. They also found PTSD. So, and that's one of the elements of being a highly sensitive person, is having this kind of long-term PTSD. I think to the emotions, at least in my case it was, I feared having these huge emotions. I feared getting so angry or so sad or so depressed, and I resisted it. And that kind of kept me in these cycles of post-traumatic stress, because then I would avoid situations where that could get triggered again, because I did not want to feel the emotion behind it. So, and they actually found long-term PTSD actually causes the amygdala to get bigger, right? Because you're activating the amygdala, the fear center, the aggression center over and over and over. You're exercising it like a muscle. And so it enlarges. It literally enlarges. And what happened because of that is then the person becomes super, super sensitive to any stimuli. They will react with fear or aggression at the slightest little trigger. They get very triggered, and just it takes them much longer to come down. So that flood of hormones, it gets amplified every time, bigger, 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 bigger. And so you get this super sensitivity of the amygdala. And I think this is what highly sensitive people do too. With the emotionality, we're practiced using our amygdala. We're practicing being angry or fearful or sad, and so we exercise those parts of our brain. We're sending, right, our blood is going to those parts of our brain because they're getting activated and being used. And so the nutrients are going there, and we're working it out like a muscle. So we're conditioning ourselves to experience that emotion again and again and again. And this is the physiology of how we get stuck in these loops. And especially with anger. They also found that dopamine has a role in anger. They did a bunch, and this is a separate study, this is not in the book that I recommended, They did a study with fruit flies, and they found that different levels of neurotransmitters affected the fruit fly's willingness to fight. So dopamine was one of the big players. Dopamine, again, a very important and interesting neurotransmitter for highly sensitive people. Dopamine is essentially like the pleasure neurotransmitter, right? When you get a little hit, you're excited about something, that anticipation gives you a little hit of dopamine. And then when you actually accomplish or manifest the situation, you get another hit of dopamine. So it's kind of that like, oh yeah, I knew this was coming, I expected it, and it was just as good as I thought it was going to be. And so the fruit flies, they found in the absence of dopamine, the flies fought with more intensity. So they just battled it out. Those were angry flies. So this would make sense that if you're in a place as a highly sensitive person where you are just not happy in life, there's going to be a lesser amount of dopamine floating around in your brain, and thus make you more susceptible to anger. Like, this makes sense. If you think your life sucks, you're going to be angry about it. You're going to be pissed off. And so I question you, if you are prone to anger as a highly sensitive person, what aspects of your life really aren't floating your boat right now? That's when I found I had the most anger, was when I was just, living in my parents' basement, trying to start a business, not in a good place. I was in a relationship with a narcissist. Like, everything in my life was crap. And so I had these huge bursts of anger that would bubble up. And so that could possibly have been from a lower level of dopamine, where, your body kind of has this different reaction and you have these angry outbursts as a result of that, as a result of the physiology. So there are reasons for all of this, right? When we go back to the emotional triangle, I always refer to this diagram, but there's a physiology, tied into our conditioning and the language, the stories we're telling ourselves, that all kind of comes together to make this stuff happen. And then we have the emotions in the middle, which is like the fire. It's like the fire that's blazing up. And in this case, it would be anger, right? So you have all these things kind of working against you if you're getting angry all the time, and you're having this fire, rise up all the time and overtake you. Literally, it overtakes your physiology, and then you're literally not yourself for at least 20 minutes to several hours or days after an angry outburst. So, and it's interesting because placebos, by the way, this is how placebos actually work to quiet the amygdala. So when you tell someone or administer, tell them, oh, this isn't going to hurt at all, like, we give you this special cream that is going to numb the pain, what is happening is you're actually talking to the prefrontal cortex. And then the prefrontal cortex sends signals back to the amygdala that's like, this isn't going to hurt at all. And the amygdala is like, okay, and just, comes along for the ride. So it's really interesting how all this stuff is tied together. I love neurobiology. I'm just infinitely fascinated by it. So what are our options as highly sensitive people to deal with anger? If we're having a lot of angry outbursts, what are the best ways to deal with it? And we're going to reference back to the emotional triangle to kind of point out why each of these methods is good or bad. So what are our options? Bottle it. So obviously no one these days is advocating suppressing your emotions. That was kind of more in the 50s. Where they're like, just don't feel it, just stuff it down. Why would we not want to bottle it? Well, essentially, again, that research that they found where they told people to actively not have a reaction to, these gory photos they were going to show them, activated the amygdala even more. So essentially what we're doing, we're stoking the fire by activating our physiology all over again by bottling our emotions. So that is not a good option for dealing with anger. Expressing it. Now, this is a little bit controversial. A lot of people will say that, oh, it's common sense. If you feel angry, go punch a pillow. Go, scream into a pillow. Go express your anger. Get it out of yourself. That's slightly better than bottling it up. However, what you're doing is you're actually giving your body a reason to have that emotion again, right? You're conditioning yourself to like, okay, when my amygdala gets stimulated and I have this burst of energy, I'm going to go do something with it. And so there's a kind of like a payoff right? You kind of are getting your dopamine centers involved in like, oh, I get to smash this out into a pillow. And so by expressing it, you're conditioning yourself and your body to need to do more expressing. So again, this isn't the greatest way to deal with anger. If you're dealing with it this way, know that there are other options for you that will work more with your body and mind and not perpetuate the angry cycle. If you don't mind being an angry person, by all means, punch the pillow, go for it. I've reverted to that sometimes too. Sometimes you just have to do that. The third option we have is just kind of allowing it. And I have a great stop, drop, and roll maneuver I'm going to teach you in just a minute on how to allow it. But allowing it essentially, now what that does is we have the anger in the middle. Allowing it is just letting it be a physiological reaction and not attaching meaning to it, right? When we attach meaning to it, we're telling a story, we're putting language to it, which then conditions our body and mind. And so if we can drop the story, this is taken from Buddhist philosophy, if we can drop the story behind the anger and just feel it, just stay in the moment with it and feel it without any meaning behind it, that is actually the best way to move through anger so that you don't condition yourself to be more and more angry, so that you don't have more and more angry outbursts and you're not perpetuating the anger cycle. And you're becoming then a calmer person. And obviously they also, in the book, the Behave book, they mention that, if you really want to, the most effective way is not to wait until the fire's burning and not to wait until you're actually angry, but to address it beforehand. This is why cognitive behavioral therapy is really excellent for emotional regulation for highly sensitive people, because it teaches you to reframe things, right? It messes with your conditioning. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a method of questioning what you're thinking and feeling. And so when you start to question your reality and be like, okay, is this person really mad at me? Or, are they insulting me, or are they just having a bad day themselves and I don't need to worry about it? When you start questioning beforehand and reframing your conditioning, you are then affecting the triangle, right? You're lessening the fire. You are training yourself not to get angry before the event happens. And that's the best time to deal with anger, is before it happens. I highly recommend the video I made last week on self-care versus damage control. I'll put the link right above here. But what happens, we can't always do that. So what do we do if we are in the midst of anger, we're really angry about something and we need to deal with it? What's a great emergency maneuver we can do? So I've come up with a tactic called stop, drop, and roll. Again, this draws from the research on emotion and Buddhist philosophy. Essentially what we're going to do is stop. We're going to disengage with whatever we're doing, which essentially is disconnecting from the language element of the triangle, right? We stop the conversation, we get ourselves out of the situation. That essentially stops the continuation of the language that is in our head, right? We're removing the stimulus. Drop. So drop the thoughts that you're having. This also kind of draws from the language element too, but you're dropping the thoughts. So stop, disengage, drop the story, drop the thoughts you're having. Just kind of clear your mind, make it a blank slate. Now, this is going to be difficult to do, but if you do it, you will feel relief within a few minutes. Drop the thought, because then we're not activating those stories of like, this person wronged me, this person, because those are the thoughts that are fueling that fire and making us angry. And when we literally drop it, and sometimes I say to myself, like, I don't know, what is the truth here? I don't know that this is the truth. Sometimes we mind read other people. Like, sometimes their intention wasn't to anger us or to take something away from us. And so if we can drop the thoughts, drop the language in our head, the chitter chatter, just drop it. Just kind of like clear your head and then roll. This is a person on a roller coaster. They're kind of, riding the roller coaster like, wee. So roll with what you're feeling. Roll, just get into your body, feel what you're feeling in your body, and be like, okay, I feel, I have a tightness in my chest. I'm just kind of, my head feels tense. I feel tense, a tense sensation. Use body terms. Describe to yourself what you were feeling in your own body. And a lot of the time, we need to attend to ourselves. We might be hungry, thirsty, tired. There's something else going on in our body typically that we're not attending to that is creating, again, adding to the fuel to the fire of our anger. And so, go attend to those things. Go take a nap. Go eat something. Go for a walk. A walk is an excellent way to diffuse anger. So if you can remember, if you take nothing else away from this video, remember, if you're in the heat of an angry moment as a highly sensitive person, one of the healthiest ways you can deal with it is stop, drop, and roll. Stop what you're doing. Just, disengage from the conversation or the event. Drop the thoughts you have. Drop the assumptions you're making. Drop the story you're telling yourself. Because when you drop that attachment to your identity of like, I am being wronged, I am upset about this, that starts to diffuse the anger. You're calming your amygdala, essentially. If there's no threat to you, then your amygdala is going to chill out. So stop what you're doing, drop the thoughts, drop the story, drop whatever chatter is going on in your head. Just be, clear the mind, just drop it. And then roll with whatever your body is feeling. Get on, just like you're on a roller coaster. You're not judging that roller coaster. You're just experiencing what you're feeling in your body. Roll with the body sensations. Sit with them. Allow them to be. You're going to be feeling all those hormones pulsing through your body. Just experience it for what it is. Attach no meaning to it. And then as you do that, within a few minutes, you will experience relief from your anger. So leave a comment below. What did you think about today's topic? Will this help you dissipate your anger? Will these techniques and this understanding help you become a less angry person as a highly sensitive person? And if you are an HSP who is struggling with constant anger, angry outbursts, let's talk. I have some excellent tools on my website, emotionalfireacademy.com, and I can help you move past your behavioral patterns using everything that I've talked about today and some other wonderful strategies. So have a wonderful day, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Bye.